Sabrina 2000s comic, issue 8. Salem asks Sabrina when they got NTV. She explains that a salesman talked aunties into a 2-week trial period. Won't she say, my aunties? And they just hooked up their satellite witch dish. What took so long? Wouldn't these witches have gotten it as soon as possible? Salem begs Sabrina to turn it off when a show called Who Wants to Adopt a Pet comes up. It turns out there's a baby dragon on the TV. I remember this story, and not in a good way. Suddenly, instead of being scared like before, Salem's cynical about the sappy sales pitch, as I wonder why he didn't just turn off the TV with magic in a second. Or change the channel to some random other channel in a second. Just by pointing. This entire plot would never happen. It wouldn't be so flimsy if Salem wasn't in the same room with her at the time. Sabrina's told that if dragons aren't adopted, they turn into tiny toys sold at the shops. I guess there's a spell on them all that makes that happen to them after a while. It does make sense that they'd want to control the dragon population, because the last thing you want to have too many of is a dragon. Sabrina shouts no and runs over to the phone, immediately being manipulated into action by the commercial, and apparently assuming her aunt would be okay with her adopting the pet. Does she do this every time she sees a commercial for pets? Salem explains that the dragon population is out of control, and they need spaying programs like mortals have here. I refuse to believe witches wouldn't have those. I say this because Sabrina's response is, in the meantime, implying that Salem's saying witches don't have those. When having magic freeing up ancient witches' time from farming and hunting would result in early research on technology and science. Not to mention they could have spaying programs with magic and potions. Sabrina says that she'll be fine, and her aunts are always at her to show some responsibility. And it'd also be responsible to prevent something from being turned into a toy. I guess by the time he started saying that she has no idea, it was already too late for a proper explanation. Why isn't Salem pointing at Sabrina to prevent her from ordering the dragon? He could have easily frozen her in time, or made her forget about what she wanted to do. The next evening, Sabrina's aunts are wary about her decision, and Hilda tells her that being responsible means not making rash decisions, which I was thinking earlier. But it shouldn't be Hilda saying this. One of her aunts should be the fun aunt, encouraging her to do it, saying, "Oh, what's the worst that can happen?" You'd think Salem would do that. Instead, she just says the same things she would anyways. They hear a noise, and Sabrina says the horn came from up in the attic, where the portal to the other realm is. Salem throws the pet dragon on Sabrina's chest. It was obvious the whole time that having a dragon would go horribly wrong for her, because Salem, the experienced witch, was acting wary about it. And this is an episodic series, so letting her keep the dragon would change the status quo. Besides, we don't need another annoying new character. She pets the dragon's snout, calling him sweet as it purrs, and Salem's not very happy, but doesn't explain why. He's portrayed like a person all the time, and almost never is treated like Sabrina's pet cat. So it's confusing that he would be jealous of this, because he doesn't demand to be treated like a pet cat. Sabrina just assumes he's jealous and wants the two of them to be good friends. And for no reason at all, the dragon breathes fire and burns the very top of his head. Logically, he would have burned his face, since he was at eye level with him last panel. This is stupid. At least the dragon apologizes, but he'd have to do that on purpose. Why does the pet dragon know how to talk? At that point, it's not a pet. It's a fellow sentient being that wants to move in with them. If he's smart enough to speak English right away, he wouldn't agree to go out on a leash to go to the bathroom. He'd find that demeaning and embarrassing and just go to the toilet. And if pet dragons are expected to do what their master wants, like tricks and rides, wouldn't that be no different than slavery? Hilda says that Sabrina will need to walk him at night so the neighbors won't see him. Why doesn't it occur to these nitwits to just shapeshift him to look like a dog? If Sabrina's expected to walk him at night, well, first of all, that means she'd barely get any sleep because she'd be expected to wake up every couple of hours. Her aunts shouldn't put her through that. Second, I'm sure the dragons are used to living on a normal sleep schedule, so he'd want to sleep during the night. So this isn't gonna work out. He'd want to go to the bathroom during the day when he's awake. Why don't these idiots just brainwash him into being fine with using the toilet? It's not like they're changing his whole personality, so what's the problem? It's just a quicker way to potty train. Then, as if we needed even more forced conflict, the stupidly named dragon Emerson reveals that dragons go for a fly, and this causes Sabrina to scream and beg him to land. Why doesn't he land immediately then? He's not a sociopath, is he? Who would buy a dragon if they were forced to put up with this every day? Well, it wasn't in the ad. I guess the main people buying these are people who don't live in the witch world where bad word of mouth would spread all over about the dragons. Zelda says she's gonna get her other realm field guide to figure out what breed the dragon is. And Hilda tells Salem to knock off the martyr show as he pointlessly paraphrases a Shakespearean story. Why is he being portrayed like this? It's painfully unfunny. It's the definition of a lame joke. The last thing you want your comedy to do is have most of its jokes be lame. We cut to a few hours later, where Sabrina's wearing some glaringly ugly white and black pajamas. You'd think she would wear pink pajamas. She tells her aunts that Emerson's sleeping in a carton next to her bed. Why doesn't this witch just use magic to summon a bed for a pet? The only way this story is using them being witches is that they have access to a dragon from Witch TV. This could have been like interdimensional cable, letting us see what Witch TV is like. Salem's too mad at Sabrina to come and snuggle like he always does, apparently, wanting to punish her for getting another pet, but he doesn't just brainwash her into deciding to get rid of it, so he's a moron. He tried to take over the world at some point, there's no excuse for him holding back. Zelda finds Emerson's breed in her book, and reveals the bullshit diabolical ex machina that's gonna force Sabrina to get rid of him. He's a part Celtic, part Asian who's given to sudden growth spurts. Why don't these witches use magic to get rid of the growth spurts and keep him a cute baby dragon for as long as they want? Even if they can't imagine that, because you can't imagine an absence of something. Wouldn't that be what potions are for? The ants just want to jump at any excuse to get rid of him. I like that the writer cared enough to establish that the dragon's part Celtic and part Asian. Maybe him being a crossbreed is why he has growth spurts. But come on, who would think a dragon like that could be sold as a pet? Isn't it obvious that every member of his species would end up abandoned? Why wouldn't he be cured of his sudden growth spurts with magic before being sold to people like this, who could potentially be too stupid to know to solve this problem? Why not cure the has to be walked at night to go to the bathroom problem too? Also, it sure is convenient for them that he didn't have his sudden growth spurt, like, in the middle of the commercial, or before even getting to do the commercial. Emerson thankfully apologizes, and the writer even has him reveal that he was listening to Zelda talk about him. So good. I wasn't expected to believe he was deaf to it because he wasn't in the same room as them. And he's right, he is still cute. If a witch can cast a spell on Salem to keep him a cat of the same physical age for centuries, I'm pretty sure Zelda could do something similar to Emerson. This comic has no business portraying Zelda smart ever again if she can't even think of a solution to any of the dragon problems. It should be explained that dragons are immune to magic. That would explain why witches don't just zap a lot of them away if there's too many of them. And the witches think that killing dragons with other means would be too cruel. At least some of them would. Salem's not very surprised that there's a problem, and somehow Emerson's in a good mood about this all of a sudden, and says he's just doing what comes naturally and chuckles. Salem could have warned Sabrina about all of these dragon problems before she'd even order one. Sabrina thinks she knows how to solve this, but because she's a complete idiot, and so is everyone around her, her solution isn't to go find a magic potion to return him to normal, or point at him to return him to normal. Instead, she's just moving him into the garage. Why doesn't the story show her pointing at him and explain that magic doesn't work on him? Even then, I don't see why dragons would be immune to magic. Sure, they're magical creatures, but so are witches. Witches aren't immune to magic. And they're known for being way more magical than dragons. How can immunity to magic evolve in nature? It's above nature. Hilda says out of nowhere that the reason people don't keep exotic pets is that it can be unfair to the animal. So, that was the moral of the story? I thought the moral of the story was, don't adopt the pet you know nothing about just because you saw a commercial about it. And this so-called pet can talk, so we should be able to tell them everything they need to know to take care of him right away. Which a real exotic pet couldn't do. And the pet doesn't seem to be suffering, so the only person the situation's being unfair to is Sabrina. Zelda says they'll try their best to uphold Sabrina's commitment. I wish she explained that the reason for this is that, like Sabrina, she doesn't want Emerson to turn into a toy. Wait a minute, magic can affect dragons, because a witch's spell has to be why he's able to turn into a toy if he's not someone's pet for long enough. All the dragons would have gone extinct before humans became smart enough to domesticate them, if it was natural to them to be like this. Unless they were all created by witches in the first place. Anyways, it would cut the story short at its most interesting if Zelda decided to get rid of him right here. So for the sake of having the plot, I guess Zelda wanting to save the dragon from a creepy fate is enough of a justification for her to humor Sabrina. Still, Zelda saying this is where it hit me how strange it is that they're humoring her. This is a family that completely controls Sabrina. The last story we saw at Hilden, she forced Sabrina to get a job. Now they're humoring her when by all means they should put their foot down. You'd think any other parent would have done that when a strange pet was ordered without their permission. Hilda tells Emerson to stay in the garage while Sabrina's in school tomorrow, and Salem bets he'll screw up. And frustratingly, he's told to hush again. I really hate the complainer's always wrong trope. Just because he's being negative, he's told to hush, even though he's the smartest one of them all. They don't have to shush him. Once they know he's right, the next afternoon, Salem happily tells Sabrina that they're friends again, and out of complete nowhere, we see the garage full of needlessly creepy-looking mythological creatures because Emerson wanted to throw a party. There's never any indication that this baby dragon on Adopt a Pet commercial knew all of these people. Apparently they're his pals from the orphanage, but I don't see how. They aren't shaped like potential pets. A lot of them are humans. This isn't a natural way to resolve the plot. This isn't taking advantage of him being a dragon, because you wouldn't expect this of dragons. Or a pet. Why would he do this? Sure, he got lonely. I guess as a baby dragon, he's naive enough to assume the ants would be fine with him relieving his loneliness, and so he won't have to ask permission. So it's just barely not an idiot bomb. Just him being naive, as he assumes that no one would be mad at him for getting a bunch of people to have fun. I don't feel like the plot of Sabrina having a pet dragon was resolved naturally. We don't see her get witnessed having the dragon by mortals. Okay, this party was foreshadowed because the book said he was sociable. But he was being sociable with Sabrina's family too. He has them as it is. Couldn't Salem have just framed the pet for a bunch of things, actually using the plot point that he's jealous of it? Sure, it'd be kind of annoying that Salem would get away with that, but you could punish him with a bunch of slapstick afterwards. There's no way to keep the story from being a frustrating waste of time. And she had no actual use for a pet dragon because she's not fighting monsters. I'm expected to believe it'd take powerful magic to send all the partygoers back to the other realm in one go, when I'm sure warping them to the portal in the attic would be easy to imagine for anyone. So why'd Emerson think this? And I guess by powerful he means experienced. Hence Zelda having powerful magic, when I'm sure she wouldn't be any more powerful than the average adult witch. So the adults decide to give up on him, and somehow Emerson stays positive and says that turning into an inanimate toy won't be so bad. Talk about a mature way to face imminent death. I mean, this is a brand new baby dragon. You'd think he'd be crying and freaking out. He gives them all a painful hug, and Sabrina cries as he vanishes. And the story ends with Sabrina ordering the figurine he was turned into. Sure is inconvenient that she has to order it instead of owning it right away. I guess he was teleported to some witches who would turn him into that toy. I assumed he'd just turn into the toy immediately. How is Sabrina smiling at the end instead of looking sad? This is no different than having a dog of yours stuffed and keeping it in your house. She's got an inanimate object that used to be your pet. You'd think that in a kid's comic, there'd be a little lampshading of how this is creepy, and that could be a moral. I definitely had this story as a kid, because I remembered the growth spurts plot point. But if all of it actually led to was him living in the garage, when he could have had the party anywhere, what's the point? It's not like he grew so much that he grew through the roof. In the next story, Sabrina hears a shriek coming from the powder room. Wait, who has an entire room in a middle-class home devoted to powder? So they use their magic this way, but not to cure Emerson's growth spurt problem. Well, again, even if they did that, he'd keep wanting to throw parties in their garage. Unless they brainwashed him to not doing that anymore. As I expected from seeing a sink in it, the powder room is just the bathroom, as we see a bathtub with a shower curtain in it. So why the hell didn't she just call it a bathroom? It turns out Zelda screamed because her scale told her she's gained 7 pounds. 7 pounds sounds like such a small number. Is this supposed to be a sexist joke? Oh, of course she screams at that. She's a lady. Why doesn't she just zap the weight away? I hope this isn't supposed to be the entire premise, because this plot will be over in one panel. Why did we go backwards from the 90s comic, where they immediately had one of the ants zap weight away? She wonders if the scale's broken, wasting her time in a forced way, and Sabrina says she conveniently just got weighed at the nurse's office for no reason. I wish I was told why. That's pretty lazy. I don't remember that happening in my school. She confirms that the scale isn't broken, and Zelda says that she told Hilda to use low-fat bat wings in the salad dressing. So witches eat bat wings in the 2000s comic? Why are the witches portrayed just like regular people to the point of barely using the magic at all, when they also eat bat wings like it's nothing? I remember learning that in the Super Mario Bros. Cartoon, the characters didn't take advantage of the power-ups enough when they'd be really useful. This is really no better writing than that, where they don't take advantage of their magic. Because Zelda says she'll zap off the excess baggage, and Sabrina stops her! What? I thought Zelda would be the one opposed to this, because Sabrina is the one who's always told to never use magic unless it's the last resort. Sabrina even says that she's always telling her not to use her magic casually. I suppose this kind of plot would be more accepted in the 70s comic. There, sometimes Sabrina did want magic to not be used. And because she was younger than Hilda, who was a stereotypical witch, I could accept it more because it was teenage rebellion and her being independent from her and valuing hard work. Since her aunts have all the power in the world over her, it feels insultingly arbitrary that they'd suddenly listen to her when she tries to order them around in this comic. She asks Zelda to zap 5 pounds off her, and is told to get some exercise. So Zelda's proven to be a hypocrite, and that alone convinced her to try out a health club because it's free for the day. Sure, it wouldn't be fair to other people, but it's not a competition. Her zapping away weight wouldn't hurt anyone. They wanted to know about it. Zelda was confronted with the fact that she's raising Sabrina wrong because her philosophy actually inconveniences her, and she failed to learn her lesson. If Zelda's okay with zapping away her weight, I can't imagine why Sabrina could change her mind. She briefly reminded me of how she's supposed to be portrayed. At least it was really relatable of Zelda that she needs to clean off her glasses. And of course she'd want to do so in the ladies' room, because she can't just zap the glasses clean in front of a mortal, except she could. She might not be noticed, because they'd have to look directly at her, and she could just erase her memory afterwards. She tells Sabrina to design them in, and she's confused as Zelda walks away without her. Zelda says she's always wanted to try a treadmill. Okay, then why didn't she just zap up a treadmill a long time ago and use it for free? Zelda uses magic to immediately dress up in gym clothes. So casual magic is okay for her, but not for Sabrina. Granted, Sabrina is known for being a reckless idiot, so it makes logical sense as a parent to tell her no magic ever because it backfires on her. But this spell wouldn't backfire on her, unless it caused a freak out after someone saw it on security camera footage or something. But I'm guessing there's a spy witch is in charge of deleting instances of magic from mortal camera footage, and erasing the memory of any mortal who witnesses it. Zelda tells Sabrina that it's a little more fun to make the treadmill move around with levitation when she's on it. And Sabrina tells her to stop, and tells her that she can't just enchant the club's equipment. And somehow that alone convinces her to stop after she ruins her fun. Why can't they just go to a Witch World Health Club, where she'd get to use magic all she wants and entertain me? It was nice to see one measly panel of magic. This comic would be easier to enjoy if magic was this common in every story. And Sabrina's just ruining it because every time she uses magic, she tells her to stop. That's not what you'd imagine having powers to be like. If that's what the audience wanted, they wouldn't be buying Sabrina comics. Sabrina should have been written to say that she wouldn't want someone to catch Zelda doing this. But even then, that would just be a minor inconvenience to her because Zelda would just freeze the person in time, return the treadmill to its normal place, and erase the person's memory of what happened. I would have been even more mad at the story if it was the other way around, because I'm already sick of her aunts being annoying parents. But Hilda would be a lot better of a fit for this kind of story than Zelda. This would be in character for 70s Sabrina too, but it's especially aggravating in this comic because magic is treated like a bad thing most of the time. So we see a montage of Zelda using her magic. She disintegrates the racquetball every time she misses a shot. Seeing an orange-haired witch use her magic when she's mad reminds me of Hilda in the 70s comic. I don't know why this character design wasn't given to Hilda instead. Anyways, Zelda turns herself into a mermaid as other people are swimming in the pool with her. She won't be this obvious with magic around mortals. Sabrina noticed it immediately, so anyone who looks at her would too. I don't see why the same person who lectures Sabrina to not use her magic would do this. Unless she was trying to show Sabrina the error of her ways, but that'd be good writing. At first I saw the yellow and red stuff in front of Zelda's pizza. That would have made sense. Instead, she says that the lava rocks need some fresh lava because it's not hot enough in here. Why is she being this stupid? The Zelda in the sitcom would be smart enough to know that just being around lava would kill a person from convection. I guess this is one of the good stories of the comic because magic is used so much in it. But it's so confusing. Zelda says that the water is just right for a boiled newt pudding, right in front of some mortals in the hot water with her. I guess she forgot mortals don't eat that. Why is she bringing Sabrina to the health club with her anyways? That's the kind of thing an adult would do alone. Why does Sabrina have to be in this plot? Isn't it obvious you should let the fun character be fun? She can erase memories, so it wouldn't matter if she was exposing magic. Sabrina tells Zelda that she wins and tells her to just zap off the unwanted pounds. Because that would have made sense, Zelda reveals that she wasn't overusing magic on purpose. She's just gotten used to relying on it to the point where it's automatic. That's why she changes them back into their clothes just by moving her finger. Okay, it's good that she's like this because she's supposed to be a witch. But I'm just confused because Sabrina's being raised to not use magic casually. It'd be a real case of do as I say, not as I do, for her to tell Sabrina not to use magic casually, when apparently she's used to that herself. When there was no indication of this in the comic beforehand. Zelda admits that she sees the value in exercise, just not in a public place. 7 pounds is such a small amount of weight that I wouldn't be surprised if she would zap away more than that if she tried to zap weight away. Well, it was nice of her to hold her hand. The story ends with Zelda wanting a tour of the facilities with a guy because she likes how he looks, suddenly running towards him while holding Sabrina's wrist and making her cry out in pain because of it. You'd think she'd feel guilty and apologize afterwards. But I guess the panel is expecting us to believe this didn't happen afterwards because it's trying to play for comedy that she's desperate for a boyfriend and hurting her somehow. Oh, isn't it funny that the comic's not allowed to change the status quo? And so she's not even allowed a boyfriend for 2 measly stories? Even the sitcom was brave enough to have Zelda and Hilda have boyfriends for more than 1 story. In the next story, Salem doesn't want to eat his breakfast because he thinks everything in this hick town is stale. How is that possible? He's talking like he's just moved to Riverdale because he's not used to it being a hick town. Why doesn't he use magic to make it not stale? What an idiot. You know it sucks when there's a plot hole in the first panel. And Sabrina reveals that her aunts are merely renting their house. How long have they been alive? And why does she call her house a bungalow when it's got an attic? Don't bungalows by definition not have stairs? And you have to climb up the stairs to get to an attic. If she's heard the word bungalow before, you'd think she'd know it's not just a synonym for house. I guess a bungalow can still have an attic, and it just can't have a basement. It's just confusing because a character in 16 said he lived in a bungalow as an excuse for why he didn't just walk down the stairs when he was stuck on a broken escalator. Which implied that bungalows are houses without any stairs, and there's stairs in her house. Salem would have never left the house if stale tuna was supposed to be the excuse for it, because he would have just created fresh tuna with magic or something. Salem says he'd rather take the fishing pole in the wall and catch, clean, and cook his own fresh fish. Or he could just use magic to make the fish jump out of the water. I guess he just wanted an excuse to go fishing out of boredom. But that wasn't a good excuse. He says that all of the charter boats have sailed except the rusty old tub over there. And our time is wasted with the captain ranting about how the younger people don't want old-fashioned boats. Salem, instead of using magic to convince them to leave the boat or scare him away without magic, decides to go on the boat with him still on it when mortals aren't allowed to know about magic, let alone cats that are obviously magical because they can fish in the first place. Most of the time he might as well have been turned into like a pink fish that can talk on land,
because it's so obvious most of the time. It's sympathetic that the captain's lonely, but why isn't he questioning why Salem's standing up and holding a rod? The captain says he's hoping to find a giant white squid. The title of the story mentions a squid, so it completely spoils that one's gonna show up. The captain says he's quite the fisherman, and I'm just wondering why he isn't questioning why a cat is like this. Did the captain even need to be in this plot? He's not contributing anything but a plot hole. He doesn't even say that he thinks he's just a little person in a cat costume. Salem's bored of his bad sense of humor, and the sea turns black and the boat starts rocking, and the boat really does get attacked by a giant squid. Only a witch could have summoned this species to the surface of the ocean. The captain slips and hits his head on the boat, easily knocking himself out, which means Salem's free to use magic, sending the squid away. And he says he's lucky it's letting him off with a warning. If the writer knew this, why did he write it anyways? Salem would want to eat the squid, wouldn't he? I guess cats prefer regular fish. He says that all the activities stirred up the water and attracted a school of fish. So he gets them all to the boat, and the captain isn't believed that Salem got the fish for him because Salem's taking off on him, letting the captain get called a liar. It was confusingly nice of him to do him a favor and get him all that fish. Good for him. The story ends with Hilda saying that the blue fish Salem's serving her are delicious, and Zelda thanks him for it. See, that's how you write a good ending. This issue was by Mike Gallagher. The first story is about Sabrina getting guilted by a witch commercial into buying a pet dragon because the dragon would turn into a pet toy if you didn't find a permanent home. Fortunately, it's justified by there being too many dragons. But since they're affected by magic just fine because they're able to be turned into toys, then that makes me wonder why none of these witches use magic to just turn Emerson back to normal after he had a forced growth spurt. And why they didn't just tell Emerson to use the toilet instead of scaring Sabrina by flying with it at night. The whole plot had no excuse to happen in the first place, because if Salem wanted Sabrina to turn the TV off, he would have used magic to turn it off and change it to a random channel immediately. I thought he'd grow again and destroy the grudge, not throw a party. I wonder if Gallagher didn't care as much about the animated series, because he was a perfectly good writer in the 90s comic. But if that was his problem, he should have just quit writing this comic and wrote for something else. If I was stuck writing a series I didn't approve of, I'd want to make it less frustrating, or quit. The second story is about Zelda gaining a bit of weight, and for some reason Sabrina successfully convinces her to exercise it away at a health club, when she's apparently really used to magic all the time, to the point where it's automatic. I never saw any indication of that before. I like how much she uses magic, but it would have been more enjoyable if I wasn't constantly being frustrated by Sabrina telling her to stop. This actually felt like a proper Sabrina story. That's totally what a witch being at a health club would be like. So I guess this was one of the good stories. The final story is about Salem going fishing instead of just magically summoning tuna that isn't still. That was a poor excuse for the plot. I could have bought him fishing because he's bored and has lived for long enough time to try everything. So the plot should have started with a fishing part. The captain being with him just makes me wonder why he wasn't questioning why a cat could stand up and fish, and it's not like Salem was talking to him. So we didn't give him someone to interact with because he didn't interact with him. The captain just had annoying dialogue, and it was entirely up to Salem to scare the giant squid away. In the series with witches in it, why was there no explanation for why giant squid was in the mortal realm? Did Enchantress put it there to scare mortals? Don't witches want to cover up magic? What could there be to gain in having a giant squid in the sea? A story about fishing is just guaranteed to be boring. The captain's dialogue was boring. He dealt with a squid in just one page anyways. I liked that he was generous and gave the fish to other people. And the fish would go stale if he tried to keep it all for himself, because he can only eat so much fish at once.